Hi, and welcome to Horror Recapped. Today we will be examining 2003's Dreamcatcher. Beware, spoilers ahead, watch out, and take care. The movie begins with a therapist named Henry having a session with a patient, Barry. Listening to Barry talk, Henry gets tired and begins telling Barry things about his childhood that Barry had never told anyone. Confused, Barry asks how Henry could know all these, to which he replies, "Doesn't matter." Barry runs out of the office, leaving Henry alone. Henry sighs and then takes a gun from his drawer which he points to his head, ready to commit suicide. He's about to take a shot when a call comes through, causing him to shoot at the wall instead. He picks up the call and realizes it's one of his best friends at the other end, Professor Jonesy. Jonesy suggests that they head out that weekend to visit an old friend, Duddits, who they hadn't seen in years. Henry agrees to this. A lady walks into a car dealership and then walks up to the only person in the building, a man called Pete. She has lost her keys and Pete tells her it would take a day to get a duplicate. He offers to help her look for her keys instead, calling her by her name. This catches her by surprise, as she'd never given him her name. However, he brushes it off as a lucky guess. Pete helps the lady find her keys by recounting the things she had done that morning, which she hadn't told him. This spooks her, and she drives off. Just as Jonesy is about to leave the office, he gets a call from another one of his best friends, a man called Beaver. Beaver asks Jonesy to be careful, which Jonesy replies, "Be careful of what?" However, Beaver replies, "Wish I knew." Jonesy gets hit by a bus as he crosses the street on his way home. He gets rushed into an ambulance as the medics try to save him. He sees a vision of a child mumbling. 6 months later, Pete, Henry, Beaver, and Jonesy visit a house they jointly own. They chat and catch up on old times. A while later, Henry and Jonesy both go to get some wood. Jonesy mentions the time he got hit 6 months ago. He mentions that he saw Duddits across the street. However, he had looked just like the first time they met him, and he had been calling for help, only to get ignored by everyone. Jonesy goes further to explain that Duddits locked eyes with him, and then mentioned for him to come over, which was why he crossed and was hit by the bus. Later that evening, the friends get together and begin discussing a memory warehouse. This is a mental warehouse for memories unique to just the four of them. Beaver mentions that he doesn't remember what that is, to which Pete says they've all got one, and Jonesy goes on to explain how he sorts through his memory warehouse. He says that he has a secret room where he stores the things he doesn't want to forget. We see the friends 20 years earlier, as they walk towards an abandoned building, where they find 3 older kids bullying a weak-looking child, Duddits. They save Duddits from the bullies and find out he's a special kid. Back to the current time, Henry and Pete both go out of town to get some supplies while Jonesy and Beaver go hunting for meat. Jonesy notices a man, Rick, stumbling through the snow, looking lost, and he goes over to help him. Jonesy takes the man back to his home and finds out that the man got separated from his wife the day before, in the snow. Jonesy notices Rick's unusually protruding chest, but says nothing. Beaver returns from hunting. He notices an injury on Rick's face and asks if it's frostbite, but Rick waves it away, saying it's probably from an allergy, as he gets something similar once he takes peanuts. Jonesy notices that Rick's belly had gotten huge, while his chest was not normal. So, he suggests that Rick takes a nap, and he then takes him to a room to sleep. Pete and Henry have an accident as they try to avoid a lady stuck in the snow. Beaver and Jonesy notice something weird while at home. All kinds of animals from the forest were running in one direction, as though from something. As they leave the house to investigate, they notice 2 choppers in the sky. Beaver tries to ask for help from the choppers to get Rick to a hospital. However, the men in the choppers mention that the entire area is under quarantine, so no one is to leave there. Pete and Henry walk out of the tumbled vehicle, and Pete tries to confront the lady, but she simply mentions that she needs to find Rick. They help her out of the snow, and Henry makes a fire to keep them warm. He then decides to go get a vehicle from the house to pick up both Pete and the lady, as Pete had sustained a leg injury from the accident. Jonesy and Beaver go back into the house while contemplating the quarantine, when Jonesy notices blood splattered on the floor, leading to the toilet. They find Rick on the toilet seat with blood splattered everywhere in the toilet. Beaver notices that the injury had spread to cover Rick's entire face. He calls out to Rick but gets no response. Then they both hear a sound coming from the toilet, as though Rick took a dump. Beaver decides to check if Rick is still alive, so he touches him, but Rick simply slumps over. He tries to glance into the toilet. However, Jonesy stops him by closing the lid shut. As Jonesy closes the lid, something hits it from inside the toilet, causing Beaver to sit on the lid to keep it shut. The thing in the toilet begins hitting the toilet lid to get out, and Jonesy decides to get tape from the house to tape it shut. A while after Jonesy leaves, Beaver slips as he tries to pick something up from the floor. This allows the thing in the toilet to escape, revealing a monster with a snake-like body, multiple rows of teeth, and a tail that opens to reveal 4 sharp spikes. The monster lunges at Beaver, leaving an injury similar to Rick's on his neck and belly. Jonesy appears at this moment with the tape. Beaver struggles with the monster, telling Jonesy to save himself. The monster attacks Beaver aggressively and succeeds in killing him, after which he goes after Jonesy. However, Jonesy slams the door quickly, successfully trapping the monster in the toilet. This doesn't last long, however, as the door's handle breaks, causing the door to swing open. With the door open, the monster leaves the toilet but doesn't attack Jonesy. Instead, it moves behind him and climbs a towering alien. The alien stares at Jonesy for a moment before releasing red gas and entering his body. The choppers land in an area filled with military personnel, and a man walks out of one, Colonel Abraham. He walks into a building and begins conversing with his second-in-command, Owen. They discuss how best to take care of the aliens and the infected, to which the colonel says, "We kill them all." Owen tries to explain that a General Matheson, mentioned that his scientists have found that not all infected people breed the aliens. He further explains that some of them actually survive. However, the colonel brushes it aside, saying if the general had been fighting the aliens for as long as he had, 25 years, then he'd know that was impossible. Jonesy drives a snowmobile out of the house and begins conversing with himself, revealing that he has been taken over by the alien, but not killed. Mr. Gray mentions that he doesn't understand how Jonesy can keep some secrets from him while he has taken over his body. We then see Jonesy in the room for secrets in his memory warehouse. Henry, who's walking towards the house, feels Jonesy approaching through the telekinetic connection all 4 friends share. After trying to communicate with Jonesy telekinetically, he realizes that Jonesy has been possessed and hides in the snow till Jonesy passes him. Then he continues his journey towards the house, worried about Beaver. Pete gets attacked by another snake-like monster that had crawled out of the buttocks of the lady he and Henry had saved. He manages to get rid of it using a bonfire Henry made earlier. However, he also gets infected. Jonesy reaches Pete and helps him to the snowmobile. At this point, Pete realizes Jonesy has been possessed. Mr. Gray tries to force Pete to give him directions. However, Pete refuses. To make Pete talk, Mr. Gray then manipulates the infection, making Pete suffer. Jonesy begs Pete to tell Mr. Gray what he wants to know. Pete uses a different ability Duddits had given to just him to show Mr. Gray the directions to his desired location. Henry arrives at the house, but finds it covered in a bloody substance that continuously keeps growing. He grabs a shotgun and then searches for Beaver, only to find his body in the toilet. He searches the rest of the house and discovers the snake-like monster guarding a bunch of eggs. Henry kills the monster and sets the entire building on fire. The colonel, together with Owen and a team of elite soldiers groomed to fight the aliens, the blue team, fly a bunch of choppers towards the alien spaceship. Immediately they get within the vicinity of the ship. They begin hearing voices in their heads, asking to not be hurt. The colonel informs his team that it's the aliens. He then orders them to begin their assault. The blue team successfully kills multiple aliens, and the rest of the aliens control the spaceship to self-destruct, killing the entire blue team, except the colonel and Owen. On the snowmobile, Pete informs Jonesy that he's been thinking about how their special friend, Duddits, has powers. He further explains that he believes the special friend was sent there to prepare them for something, like Mr. Gray, and that maybe the friend wasn't human. Mr. Gray demands to know who this special friend is. Pete replies, "Bite my back, motherfucker." Enraged, Mr. Gray stops the snowmobile and says that he'll do more than just bite Pete's back. He then transforms into his alien form and bites half of Pete's body off, thereby killing him. Later that night, Mr. Gray gets off the snowmobile and stops a moving truck. After confirming with the truck driver that he's headed in the same direction as he is, he mentions that the truck's tailgate is open. The truck driver leaves his dog behind and gets out of the truck to close the tailgate. Mr. Gray then transforms into his alien form and eats him. He then makes the dog eat the alien corpse located in the trunk. Noticing Mr. Gray's busy state, Jonesy sneaks out of the secret room and steals some information from his memory warehouse without getting caught by him. Henry walks for hours till he's discovered by some military personnel, garbed in protective gear. They transport him to the facility housing the infected and label him as one of the infected. The colonel and Owen wear their protective gear, as the colonel shows Owen the amount of infected they currently housed. He then informs him that they'd have to kill all of them to ensure the infection doesn't spread. Henry watches them talk about the infected, and he tries to read the colonel's mind, only to discover that he has no intention of freeing the infected. Henry regains Owen's trust and tells him to inform the general about the colonel's plans. Owen tricks the colonel to get Henry out of the confinement zone. He then informs the general about the colonel's plans, causing the general to arrive and take control of the operation. The Colonel tracks Owen, using a chip embedded into the gun he had gifted him. Henry tries to communicate with Jonesy telekinetically till he successfully establishes a connection. Jonesy informs him of Mr. Gray's destination, causing Henry to ask Owen to drive him to Duddit's house, as he believes Duddit's powers are needed. Perplexed that Jonesy is still alive, Owen asks how that's possible. Henry explains that 6 months ago, after Jonesy got hit by a truck, his heart stopped twice, causing him to be declared dead by the medics. However, he came back from the dead. Henry further explains that he believes that must have changed him somehow. Owen and Henry both arrive at Duddit's house and successfully convince his mother to let him go with them. Duddits explains to Mr. Henry that Mr. Gray is searching for a water source so he can contaminate the drinking water, thereby taking over the entire planet. Mr. Gray successfully locates the water source and proceeds to open a hatch to contaminate it. However, this costs him some time as he has to do it manually. Owen and Henry successfully track down Mr. Gray. As soon as they try confronting him, however, the Colonel arrives in a chopper and begins firing at them. He succeeds in fatally injuring Owen, though not before Owen shoots one of the rotator blades of the chopper, causing it to explode. Owen dies before either Duddits or Henry can reach him. Henry rushes towards the building Mr. Gray is in and manages to shoot a snake-like monster that crawled out of the dog, thereby killing it. Enraged, Mr. Gray leaves Jones's body and takes on his own alien structure. However, before he can attack Henry, Duddits walks in and confronts him. This leads to Duddits getting stabbed by Mr. Gray's tail. Duddits then transforms into an alien and traps both he and Mr. Gray in a cocoon, killing them both. That's going to wrap up this recap. We hope you have enjoyed it. If so, please click the subscribe button with notifications turned on so you don't miss a single video.